Hey, this is Madalyn Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Do you know what, Madalyn? I've done that thing that every week I say I should do, and I have recorded the upfront to our show, which I'm going to hit the button in a minute and hope that it works. So if you haven't been to the All Things Audio space before, you are extremely welcome. This is who we are and what we're about and what's going to happen in the next hour. Well, for anyone who hasn't joined us here in the All Things Audio space before, me and Madalyn do this every single Wednesday at this time. We spend around an hour chatting about stuff that we've heard about around social audio this week. We generally start talking about news from Twitter Spaces. We also talk about Clubhouse and anything else that we might have heard that's kind of a little bit of audio news from here, there and everywhere. We spend the first part of the show talking through those different links that we found. We're recording right here on Twitter, but we're also recording for our podcast. So during the first section of this space, we won't be taking any mic requests. However, we will definitely be letting you know when we are opening the mics, and we totally want to hear from you and get your views and opinions on stuff that we've spoken about or anything else that you've got to bring to us that's around social audio today. We'd love to hear from you. So listen out for that, call out for the microphones. Just know that we are recording right here on Twitter, so your audio will be included in the replay that's available on the platform. And as I say, we're also recording for our podcast version, so your audio may well be considered for the podcast, which comes out every Friday wherever you listen to podcasts.
I love it. I love that you did that.
I mean, usually I read it. So if you haven't been in the space before, you won't know that I scrabble to say that every single week at the top of the show in kind of an attempt to let people know what's going on. And I want to make sure people know it's recorded and that we're doing the podcast and all those things. And last week, I finally nailed it.
I know, it was so good.
And so I thought, right, now I've said it right, I'm just going to pull that, put it over our bed that we use for the podcast and create it as a thing so that I don't have to stumble over it every week.
Well, you're getting lots of emoji love, so I think everybody really digs it. Yeah, that was really good.
Well, you know someone who would have loved that, don't you?
I know exactly who would have been loving this and probably playing a nice little trumpet sound for us if he was here would be George Silverman. And so sad to be sharing the news. I know plenty of people have already heard, but George Silverman passed away last week, 80 years old, which I'm still just so blown away at how active and how sharp this guy was for 80 years old, being here with us in spaces week after week after week. And you know, Suze, not only was he co-hosting 2 of my 3 weekly spaces, but for this one, number 3, he was like a regular speaker just about every week.
Oh my goodness, he was. And you know what? He was generally one of the first people in here, always there with a wave emoji. He would always give me the wave and the thumbs up that he could hear me. He was kind of my sound check. He was my tech. And you'll hear later on in All Things Audio, I've put together a bit of an audio tribute with some of our favourite stories from George, things that he told us, some of his best wisdom. And it really wasn't difficult to find those times when he'd been with us in the space, because I literally opened up a file and there he was. And I could almost tell where he was in the waveform because I've edited him so many times. It was... You know, he was even in our very first All Things Audio official recorded space back in April 2021, Madalyn. He spoke in that space as well. And when I first heard, my initial reaction was, I should really put together some clips to honour George and the fact that he was such a regular member and so active with us here in the community at All Things Audio. And it actually took me a fair few days to be able to do that, because I only knew George by his voice, and I wasn't sure that I was ready for that or that everybody else might be ready for that. But last night I thought, no, the space is tomorrow. We're going to be talking about him. And I think it's right that we remember him in this way. And I think he would approve. So I've remembered that he was talking about using classical music in spaces. I know that's something he really loved. He spoke about that quite a lot. So I've actually layered some of those clips over the Rossini Overture, William Tell. I've learned a little bit about the Rossini Overtures actually in the last 24 hours, thanks to George, about copyright and whether I could use it and all those kind of things. And we'll be playing out the space with that later on. So, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about George as well when we open the mics, because, you know, I know many of you that I can see in the space here will have spoken with him, had conversations with him about spaces, about Clubhouse, about tech. So it would be lovely to share those memories here in the All Things Audio community. Madalyn, I know you did a wonderful space on Saturday for your Twitter Smarter group that remembered him. It was beautiful.
Well, first, I want to share, I have it in the nest, and for those listening to the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. Christine Gritman, who was actually my co-host for the Twitter Smarter, and George would be our guest co-host whenever she wasn't available. And then late last year, she had to bow out because of her scheduling. And so he actually took her place and became my permanent co-host. So the two of them were quite close, and she lived pretty close to him. And while he flew thousands of miles away and got to meet with me in person last year, she lived like 10 minutes away from him and they never got that chance to connect in person. So she felt really obligated to be at the funeral this week. And so she posted this great tweet. I have it here for everybody to see. And they had a Curious George stuffed animal on the podium there at the funeral because he was always referred to as Curious George. He was always such a lifelong learner. So I really appreciated that that Christine did this. And when she got there, she told me that his wife was reading an obituary and his obituary, and that she mentioned how much he loved Twitter and all the people he met through Twitter Spaces, and even mentioned MySpaces, like named me in this in front of everybody. So, yeah, it was just quite a loss. And what happened on Saturday, if you guys don't know, every Saturday for the last 2 years, I've been hosting a space. We call it Twitter Profile Reviews. It's really simple. We review Twitter profiles and help you all make yours better. And George was one of our regulars. He was there all the time. And whenever we would take mic requests, he always had great things to share. And it was just always blowing us away with how smart he was. And here was a guy that at the time had like 2,000 followers on Twitter, not the greatest profile picture, but he always showed up, he was consistent, and he always had really smart advice. And it turned out he's like this expert in so many things for decades and decades. He wrote a book on word of mouth marketing. He was like the pioneer of telephone, what do you call it? The focus groups, telephone focus groups and conferencing. Yes. And to have him just be a part of this as an equal who just wasn't trying to be superior, just wanted to share, it was just amazing. And so we found out the news late on Friday. And normally my Saturday space is every Saturday at 1:00 Eastern. And I know George very well. He actually called me multiple times from the hospital in the 2 weeks he was in the hospital prior to his passing. And he was actually doing better, by the way. And he wanted me to let everybody know that he was okay. So it was quite a shock. But all I could think of was, if I cancel this space, George would be so mad at me. I mean, he would. I could hear him in my head going, "Don't you dare cancel that room. You better be doing your space. Don't cancel it because of me." So I knew we still had to do it, but this was going to be the next day. And I knew that wasn't going to be easy, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. And so we held a really nice tribute to George. I have that available for you guys if you want to listen to the replay. Shout out to Andrew from Spaces Dashboard, who always reminds me of cool things to do on Twitter. You would think I would always be doing every cool little tiny thing on Twitter you don't realize you can do, but I can't always remember to do them all. And this tweet is very much like the tweet that Andrew had put out, utilizing a cool little feature where you can embed a URL in an image or a video. And so I kind of duplicated it, and he gave me permission to use the image. Andrew created that awesome image that you see on the screen. And it was just a great hour of us all coming together, sharing stories about George. He had touched and moved so many people. And so if you haven't heard the replay yet, I think you all would really enjoy our big send-off for him. So, yeah, Suze, it's definitely been tough. It's going to be so strange not hearing him in our spaces. It's just going to be odd.
It really is. It really is. I didn't quite know what to do with myself over the weekend when I heard about it. I think it's testament to the power of voice, which is what George said in I went through a lot of audio yesterday of different things that he said in our space. And he always said that voice was a powerful connector. He said it several times. And that is so true, because it really hurt when I heard that he passed away. And yet, I've not been on a Zoom call with him. I've not met him face to face, but the connection across audio only was so strong, and made me realise, how tight our community really is. Like we really do kind of care for each other and think about each other, and it's really, really sad that now there's someone missing. And the only thing I could do at the time was to actually add you can still see it, the black dot to my bio. And I did that because I met George because he had a purple circle as a beta tester, same as me, which is what we all did in the early days. We all put the purple circle in our bio so that we could recognise who had access to spaces and who might be around to jump in a space with us or check something out. And there was a guy called Matt at the time who was helping George out with the tech side of it, because George was really interested in trying to record it, as I was. And we kept leaping in and out of spaces. There was one weekend where we were just backwards and forwards and all the DMs and different things. But it was because of that little purple dot that told me that this was a person that was kind of doing the same thing I was. So yeah, I changed my little dot to a black one just as a mark of respect, and just to say, George, you're inspiring and you'll still inspire me. And I'm going to miss you.
Oh, I love that. That was so sweet when you told me about changing it to the black dot. And yeah, the purple, when you would see that, and some people still have the purple emoji in front of their name on Twitter, and that was just something we all did in those early days as beta hosts on Twitter. That was our way of signaling to each other, hey, I'm a Spaces host too. So it was a way to connect with and George was very proud to be part of that beta group. But also let other people know, hey, I host Spaces. And so that purple dot was really a vital thing 2 years ago. And we all, made a big deal about. And I love what you did to show some love to George. That is really cool, Suze.
Let's move on to our social audio news. I know he'd have wanted us to continue talking social audio. And he'd have been very interested to hear that Elon had hosted a space, which is what we're going to talk about next.
He would be so excited for this news. He'd be chomping at the bit, wanting to grab the mic to talk about this. And for anybody that just arrived, we are going to be doing a tribute to him a little later. Suze put together something really wonderful, so stick around for that. But can you believe Elon finally officially hosted a space from his profile? How long have we been waiting for this?
Well, a long time. Is this his first kind of public one? Because I know he'd done some behind his subscription, had he? Like a private one?
But this was hosted from his account, which I thought was quite interesting, because I know there's been this like waiting and seeing when is he going to actually do it from his own account as a host versus him as a speaker on somebody else's space. And what was so crazy, this really happened yesterday. I'm in my Twitter feed and I see the tweet that we're sharing right now. I see that tweet in my feed. I'm like, wait a minute. It says host. He hosted a space, and I click on it, and it had just ended it said, because it'll tell you how long ago the space ended. And it said 2 minutes. I'm like, you're telling me I was 2 minutes away from catching this? So I listened to a little bit of the replay, but I have to say, I'm an advocate, and I know you are too, Suze, that when you host a space, as soon as it's over, go set the actual start time. And this thing started 0, and it took forever before they actually started talking. So I'm having to forward for it. It's like, you guys are doing your listeners a huge favor by taking a moment. But then again, he was the host, so he or somebody who has access to his Twitter would have to do it. But it's so important to do.
Oh, Elon, like Spaces 101, mate.
Elon, we have so much to teach you. DM us. We want to help you. But it does say 1 million have tuned in, so that's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely draws the numbers. He always has done.
So, we're thrilled. He's finally hosting. Maybe he'll start hosting more. So do you think that he's going to like maybe become a regular Spaces host? And I'm wondering like what prompted him to do this from his profile. Was he thinking this will give it more exposure? This will get more people on my Twitter? I mean, I'm just wondering why he finally chose to host it from his profile instead of having somebody else do it and him just showing up as a speaker.
I mean, it's hard to tell, isn't it? And who knows if he even realises that he's done it from his own profile and not via someone else or whatever, or if someone else had set it up and pressed the buttons for him and he's just gone live on Spaces, and who knows, really. I think, he's been on Spaces before, he's used it. It would just be nice if I felt like he really understood the power of it and kind of all the different buttons in it and things like that. I still feel like someone else is probably driving it all for him, and it's very much just another platform for him to kind of just talk at, really, without him fully understanding it. I guess he doesn't need to understand it. He owns the platform. He doesn't care, does he?
Right. He just shows up.
He just wants somewhere to broadcast stuff. So, yeah. Interesting. I'm sure we will see him doing more. I think there will be more behind the subscription than in front, because if you can get 1 million people in a space, then surely those 1 million people, if they know, you're going to do a space and it's behind a paywall, they'll flip you a few dollars to be able to hear it if they really want to. So I would expect to see more kind of private spaces than the public ones. But yeah, it's. I can't see him doing like a regular thing. I can't see it being like a regular monthly, weekly, kind of town hall with Elon. I can't see that happening.
Yeah, it'll just be one of those whenever he wants to do it, and there he is. So, yeah. Well, we got some exciting news coming from Andrew at Spaces Dashboard. There's a new feature that's going to be launching soon called Collections. And Andrew shared a video kind of walking through this. And I have to tell Suze, it's fascinating how he's connecting Twitter lists on Twitter to this new Collections over on Spaces Dashboard. It's very intriguing. And he says it's coming soon, but he shows the video and I'm watching it and go, oh, I want to do it. So I try to do it, but of course it stopped me. But I'm like, please let this be available very, very soon. So hopefully Andrew will be able to come share with us about this, because I think this is a really interesting way of taking an amazing feature on Twitter called Twitter Lists. If you're not using Twitter Lists, you are missing out. It's one of the best features on Twitter. And taking what's in your own Twitter list you created and populating it into a collection as Spaces Dashboard. So here would be an example. So I have a Twitter list on my profile of every guest who's been on my Twitter Smarter chat over the last almost 8 years. Anyone that's been a guest week after week after week, if you've been a guest, you're on this list. And it's a public list as well. It's not just for my eyes only. I have this so anybody could go and follow the list and take advantage of it and see all the cool people in there and see all their tweets. So I could take that, putting it into this collections, set up as a collection over Spaces Dashboard. It's going to pull all those people into it. And if they're hosting spaces, it's going to show me their upcoming spaces. It's going to show me their past ones. I'm completely blown away by this, Suze. I don't know, call me a geek, but I'm going to be so excited when I can start actually using this feature.
Yeah, I mean, it looks amazing. And like you, I'm a big fan of Twitter lists. So I can't wait to talk to Andrew in a little while and hear more about it. It certainly seems like a good way of grouping people and things together. A lot like perhaps we were hoping communities might, but over on Spaces Dashboard. I mean, looks like a great idea, and looking forward to hearing more about it. And there's more from Spaces Dashboard as well, isn't there, that we've got to chat about?
I know. It's like, but wait, there's more. Well, Andrew's so good at making these great little visuals with videos and stuff. And this is so interesting that if your Twitter space is associated with the wrong language, he has a way to go into Spaces Dashboard and adjust that, which I think is super interesting, because he says there's 160 plus languages to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, how does the language get selected? I'm not even sure that I know that bit. Andrew can probably enlighten me. I can see your purple heart.
I'm not sure, but he probably could. He probably could, because I've seen some spaces where I know the language is not set right. And I figure it's something that must be happening at Twitter. I'm sure he can fully explain this to us, but I'm sure it's something on Twitter side. And then when you're in Space's dashboard for discoverability, you're like, why does it say that language? So I definitely want to learn more about that, because I do find this super fascinating. Well, why don't we go through the rest of our news? We don't have that much today. You got some Clubhouse news that you wanted to share, and then some other miscellaneous stuff, and we'll open up the space, hear from everybody. Definitely want to hear from Andrew, and then we'll do our tribute to George.
Yeah, I mean, so this next tweet that I spotted on my timeline from Thea, I had to include it in this week's All Things Audio, because she puts into words exactly what I've been saying for the last few weeks around Clubhouse. So her tweet says, navigating Clubhouse has become increasingly hard, unnecessarily difficult, or is it just me? All I want to do is roam around and see what's the crack. All I get now are club invites, RSVPs for scheduled rooms and occasional replays. Is it just pilot error on my part, Clubhousers? Sadly, no, it isn't, I don't think. I think we discussed it quite a bit last week about how it had become quite muddled. We also talked about how they're hopefully simplifying the app and they've got their own plan in mind, including, off the back of the 50% staff cut that they announced a few weeks ago. But just interesting to see someone actually, putting a tweet out there that totally encapsulated my sentiments around Clubhouse at the moment. So it's not just me and it's not just you, Thea. So, that's kind of where we're at with Clubhouse, I think, at the minute. This last one is actually about an app that we haven't spoken about for a while, Madalyn. It's one of the standalone apps called Call-In, which was one of the ones that I think we spoke about fairly early on All Things Audio. It was very much kind of based on that conference call idea, but it's now been sold. So David Sachs announced on Twitter that Rumble Video has acquired Get Call-In. So as it says in the name, this sounds like quite a hard pivot from audio to video. Rumble is a video app. It is there for video creators and video content. The page about it on the web is kind of very much all about, a TV app, grow your audience with this public video sharing platform, build private communities, share your content, but it's video and not audio. So it's kind of another app that is turning away from this social audio only idea and incorporating video again. So what's going on here, Madalyn? There's so many of these that we're seeing, and, even podcasting with YouTube coming on board. We discussed, about how that brings video into the play of audio content. When is audio going to be good enough as audio again?
Such a good question. I mean, it's good enough for me. I just don't understand. I'm not getting it. That's for sure. And we talked about Get Call-In before. I remember a while back, you were like super excited about it. We talked about it. So I was quite surprised with this tweet when I heard that they were acquired.
Yeah, I mean, I guess good for them. They've sold it on. It's become a platform that is worth being sold. But in the same breath, it's not going to be what it was. I think we can be, quite sure that this is going to be way more visual than it has been up until now. And yeah, I'm not quite sure what's going wrong, certainly with the standalone apps. I mean, Clubhouse is still there. But of all the others that we've covered over the last 2 years, Madalyn, there's probably only a handful that are still going, that are kind of standalone apps outside of LinkedIn, Twitter, a major platform. I'm just not quite sure where social audio's fallen down in a way. It's an interesting one.
Absolutely. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Madalyn. Hey, Suze.
Hi there.
So, I'm intrigued by your first impressions of the video of collections.
Yes, and when I was putting it in the Nest, sometimes the Nest doesn't work quite right, I've noticed. And I tried putting it in there 3 times while I was talking about it, and then I realized it never did make it in. So I just put it in there now. So it's in the nest. The video is intriguing. I mean, like within a minute, I'm like, oh my God, I must have this and I must have it now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, while you were talking, you mentioned your Twitter Smarter Guests. So I'm just looking at the dashboard for the Twitter Smarter Guests now. It's very intriguing.
Yes, but it wouldn't let me finish.
Yeah, we will be rolling it actively out for everyone over the next week. But I've just created your list now. I mean,
Okay.
that's the beauty of it. It literally takes seconds. And from a curation and from a discovery point of view, it opens up so many different pathways that you probably may not have gone down before. It's just very, very exciting to use because I'm constantly using it now. And I just can't wait to see what other collections everybody comes up with, not just in English, but in all the other languages. I mean, that's really the power.
Can you just explain exactly what it's doing? So are you kind of pulling lists from a profile into dashboard, and then what's happening from there?
Well, again, you don't have to use a Twitter list. So that's just one option. So the idea being, we heard very early on that people always said, well, it's okay having these leaderboards with all of the big rooms, but what happens when you find another way to actually create a dashboard just based on expertise? So we always thought there must be a way that we can allow people to essentially create their own dashboard, their own collection, and then make it shareable so that if everybody started using it, that would almost become more popular than the leaderboards themselves. So the way you can do it is you essentially group the people that you associate with a certain collection. And you can either do it as you're using the dashboard. When you see somebody good, you say, yeah, I'll follow them. You put them into your collection. Or you can take an existing Twitter list or multiple Twitter lists because you can combine them. And you can combine Twitter lists and ad hoc people that you add as well. And essentially then what it does is it will go through and take, okay, where have they hosted, where have they co-hosted, and where have they spoken in a space before? So then you can actually have these buttons that allow you to toggle those options on and off. So essentially you might follow somebody, but you weren't aware that they've spoken in these other 10 spaces. So suddenly you're exposed to another 10 hosts that you didn't even know about that probably are quite interesting because the person you're following has been in their space and spoke about. So your exploration for that starts to happen and you start to find new people. And then we also have a function, again, it's 2 toggles, that then allows you to say, okay, out of the people that are in my collection, can you show me any Twitter spaces that have shared a tweet from them? So not only are you finding people where they've spoken, you're now finding where people have taken the time to share their content in the nest. Again, another discovery mechanism, another signal that you can explore. But then, of course, somebody might write a tweet about you and mention you and share that in the nest. So we also uncover those. So you can toggle these on and off, all based on the collections that you create. And you don't have to make these public. You might say, actually, there's a competitive angle here where I want to watch these people, know where they're speaking, know what they've hosted in the past, and I don't want anybody else to see. So you have the option to keep it private or make it open. You can actually go in and favorite other people's collections as well. So we can start to see what are the most popular collections around the globe. You've got your own favorite section. You can have new collections that have been built, and we're going to showcase them to you as well from everybody. And you can start to maybe explore some of those. So we've got museums and galleries, football clubs. We've got the 554 members of Congress in the US. We've got 130 ad agencies. We've got 3,000 scientists who do climate issues. We've got crypto. We've got Spaces Day. We've got VC Angels. We've got all of the Twitter staff who have been mentioned on their affiliate official Twitter handle. So now you can go and see wherever they've actually spoken in the past, who's sharing their tweets, what spaces they're talking in. It really does give you a completely new way to explore and discover Twitter Spaces and the content.
You're certainly trying to make the ultimate Spaces discoverability tool, Andrew, that's for sure.
That's our goal. That's our North Star, and we're not going to change.
It really is. It really is. I put a link. There's a tweet in the nest. We'll have it available for our podcast listeners as well in the show notes. But this link will take you right to this page over at Spaces dashboard where you can see it shows you popular collections. It'll show your favorite. So you can favorite any of these, just a little heart, and then it'll show up there. Andrew, this is just amazing. I am so blown away. This will definitely take things to a whole new level.
I really hope so. It's been one of those things that's always been on our back burner, and we've been playing about with it for the last month. And we really feel it's such a clever way to utilize Twitter lists, because we've seen that Twitter are now updating the fact that they're trying to make those more discoverable, which is fantastic, and the power of Twitter lists. And essentially what we're doing now is harnessing all of that great work people have done and bringing it into Twitter Spaces. And what it also does, we've noticed, it's a great way to uncover in certain categories the opportunity. What I mean by that is we can look at some Premiership football clubs, for example, and only see that a handful of them are using Twitter Spaces. And then we look at the Global Football League and we see that actually there's probably still a huge opportunity for Twitter and its brand to go out to these clubs and say, look, now we can see as a salesperson, you're not actually using Twitter Spaces yet, but all these competitors are. We think you should now get into the game. Let's run you through a little training mechanism. There's so many ways we can do it.
Sounds great. You're finding the gaps and filling them.
Well, I got another tweet I'm going to put in the nest because you have this one called Spaces Day Speakers and you explain it in your YouTube how-to video. And Suze, you're actually in there. And when you click on this link, you're just going to be blown away at the information you can see.
Yeah, that was a great one. Again, using an old list from 2 years ago from our Spaces Day 24-hour global celebration. And now I can go in and actually see what they're up to, where they're speaking, what tweets are being shared. Just utilizing all the work we'd already done. And what I think is really fascinating, though, is when you combine two people's Twitter lists. And if you use somebody's Twitter list, this is another key thing, we actually give a mention to the list owner. So we make sure everybody knows where you got the list from. So we want to make sure everyone gets credit. And the fact that you can then combine, add, mix and match, whatever it is, but then we basically turn it into a dashboard page. And I'm really intrigued to see which of these collections almost rise to the top and people start using those as opposed to the leaderboards. Because we hear sometimes people say, I don't want to see all of the X category spaces on the leaderboard. Can you remove them? Well, now you can, because if you don't like what you see, you create your own collection and then you can share it. And if people like that, you then rise to the top as the person who created the collection.
I love that. That is just amazing. Amazing.
It's great thinking. Can you enlighten me a little about the languages tweet that we discussed earlier? So if Twitter has associated your space with the wrong language, how would your space be associated with a language in the first place? Is that just directly from your setup on your profile?
We never, ever got to a clear answer from the team on that. Is the real answer. No one could really tell us exactly how they were doing it. We've come up with so many solutions of how they can fix it. So one thing I think might happen is people might be using VPNs as well. And suddenly when they might be tracking it from that and suddenly where your IP is coming from a different location, maybe they use that. Because sometimes we see somebody's dashboard page and literally 5 days in a row, they've got different countries and it, screws up the leaderboard for the languages. So we had to find a way that you could go in and you essentially just do it on your profile. You log into the dashboard, you go to profile, you scroll down, and it lets you know what we currently have you as a default or what Twitter have told us you are. And you can go in and change it. And we've got over 160 languages, more than what actually Twitter offer in the API, which could open up some really interesting leaderboard stances. But they could really fix it quite easily by when you start your space in the same way that you add your tags. They could just have a default language. This is what we think you're about to talk in. If you'd like to change it, do it now. And it's just a simple, like you do with the tags, have a look. No, click Arabic. Suddenly this space is Arabic. It would then get filtered into the API and there'd be no problem. That would be a very simple way for them to do it. Of course, they also have the transcription. So they could easily, with machine learning and AI, just marry up the conversation and the transcript and then auto detect from that with the captions. There's no reason why, where we are technology wise, that we still have weird language classification on Twitter Spaces. But I'm sure Elon will get round to it at some point.
I'm sure it's on his list. And for now, we can go over to Dashboard and update our own language. So that's a good thing to know.
Yeah, if you ever spot a rogue country in there, it's not us just making it up. It's come from the API. But you can always go in, set your default language, and then it will update all of your past spaces as well. So it will go back, clean them up, and then anything you do forward will know exactly what you told us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Andrew, for telling us all about the collections, all about the languages. Super. Thank you very much for your time. For anyone listening on the podcast, anything that we've mentioned being in the nest is going to be linked in the show notes, so do check those out. Michael, hi there. How are you?
Hello, friends.
Hello.
I am here for two reasons. One is to talk about George, but I also want to give you a little update on Clubhouse as well. So I'll start with Clubhouse. They are they're continuing to do a weekly town hall sort of program, but they've changed up the format, having some entertainment and some other community, getting to know you sorts of things. Because what they've basically said this week is this latest update to the Clubhouse app is the last update that's going to be released for a little while, is what they said. And so they keep saying it over and over again, heads down, working on a big update to the Clubhouse app. And in the meantime, they don't have much else to say. So that's where things are at. They had the Club to House transition. They had layoffs, big time layoffs at the company. They have a vision of where they're going, and they're working on that. And so it's sort of radio silence going forward for a little while. So now that the dust is settling on the platform, there are a lot of people that are sort of confused and not sure where to go with things. There are some people who are sort of bubbling up and becoming creators, or they're doing some rooms and some programs that we had not seen before because there has been a bit of a void of content. Clubhouse wants it to be a platform for building friendships, but there still needs to be some content for discussion and things in there. And so some people are doing that. So Clubhouse is in a sort of a holding pattern. The community is in a holding pattern and wait and see until this big update comes out sometime down the line.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, as you say, their focus now is on these kind of building up friendship groups and building relationships, but you've still got to have something in common to talk about, right? So you've still got to have a topic.
Yeah, and I really feel very strongly from having been on the platform for 2+ years now that the magic of it is not just the relationships and the community building, and it's not just the content, but it's a marriage of both. It is finding ways to engage in really interesting conversations and sort of to move human society forward through talking about really engaging, interesting things, making music, that kind of stuff. So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at us at All Things Audio, we have a common interest in that we're interested in audio one way or another. And that's what brings us together and creates the community and the friendships and the relationships between us. So, yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. Thank you so much for giving us that update, Michael. You wanted to talk about George.
Let's go ahead and play your tribute. He was such a big part of this space week after week.
He really was.
Next up is George. Hey, George.
Hey, how are you?
Well, I've been in it for 53 years, so I think I know some of where it's going, which, we should do it on telephone, conference calls, and 900 numbers and all sorts of ways. And one of the things, I probably can name a dozen ways things that's going to happen. So customer seminars, I think, are going to be a gigantic thing, because it's word of mouth, and everybody knows that word of mouth is the most powerful thing in all of marketing. It's more powerful than all of the rest of marketing put together. I proved that in my book, Secrets of Word of Mouth Marketing. It's widely acknowledged. I don't think there's any marketer that would dispute it. And this is the perfect word of mouth medium. This is word of mouth. What we're doing right now is word of mouth about social media in general, and Spaces in particular, and Clubhouse in particular. But we are now engaging in word of mouth. We're talking about what's good, what's bad, what we like, what we dislike, what our experiences are, and where it's going to be going in the future. This is what Nicholas Negroponte and MIT called electronic word of mouth. That's what we're doing. We're a bunch of friends sitting in a living room saying, "Hey, you tried this new Spaces thing?" When I did it with medical doctors and agriculture, my out-of-pocket expenses were thousands of dollars per group. So I had to charge thousands of dollars per group to do these. Now they're free. The cost of a telephone conference call, which we used to do them in, a nationwide, forget worldwide, a nationwide telephone conference cost me $300 to $400 for 10 people. So now it's free. So this is a totally different world we're living in, and that's where Spaces is going to go. That's one of the places Spaces is going to go. It's totally untapped. Nobody's doing it. If I were younger, I would do it here and make a few $1 million at it. I went through 6 versions of my telephone conference system. I was the first one to own a telephone conference system that was outside of AT&T. And I had engineers engineer them for me. And all the engineers, they're not people. So they wanted to put in things like hand raising and muting and stuff like that I never needed.
And I'm an audio editor. I used to use the aluminum editing block with 1/4-inch tape back in those days. So I'm really, I've been in this a long time. There's something sensual about it, taking that razor blade and cutting it and taping it. I'm going to, as I start all my sessions, I'm going to play a minute or two of Rossini Overture, and I'm going to then be sending out my tweets that we've started. Here's the topic, et cetera, and then I'll get on live. But I'm definitely going to start every single session with music. Super tweets or mega tweets or long form tweets, whatever the hell you want to call them, or tweets.
I call them squawks.
Squawks. I like it. But I like super tweets. But I'm now writing my book in super tweets. So instead of just writing in the Mind Skills Playbook, I'm now writing it on Twitter. If it's audio only, what happens is people translate their facial expressions and gestures into what I call audio gestures. So people will say, aha, instead of nodding their head, knowing that they're on video. See, on Zoom, they might nod their head, or they might wiggle their fingers, in that deaf applause gesture. But when they're audio only, they translate their voice into these audio gestures. Yeah, got it. Yep, right. That's why I like open mic. And we had special interest groups over conference call, and they formed very strong relationships. They came back week after week, became very close friends, and all the groups decided to meet at various times. And they would meet, and it was electric. It was dynamite. The phrase that was almost always used was, I feel like I've known you for years.
Wow. That was wonderful. Thank you for putting that together, Suze. Wow. He's going to live on with us. We have so much of him in us from his teachings, his learnings, and we have so many replays.
Yeah, there were a lot. As I say, it was not difficult to find gold. I've got all of the episodes on my hard drive. I've got all the raw material from all the spaces, and I could just basically pluck any one of them. And there was a lot. There were things that I definitely wanted to hear. The "Hey, how are ya" is just how I can hear him saying it in my head all the time. And I wanted to hear that story of his conference calls, and he was just astonished that we could do this like this right here every week. And I can see why. He was a pioneer with this stuff, with the way that he was using it and doing it years and years ago. So I felt like it was kind of only right, really, to put those clips together and to remember him with all of you here.
It was well done. And, he rarely tooted his own horn. Most people don't even realize he wrote a book about word of mouth marketing. He's like one of the pioneers of word of mouth marketing. And I've been wanting to read it for quite some time. It was actually on my wish list at Audible. And then I finally last night was like, I got to get this because I definitely, because the beauty also is, Suze, is his voice too. He narrates it. So it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to love listening. It'll be hard at first, but it'll be just wonderful. Hearing him in my ear, sharing his amazing advice on word of mouth marketing. I even want to start a little book club I'm sure there are others who would like to read it as well. And then we can just get together and talk about it. So I think that would be really fun. I just put a tweet in the nest with the link over at Amazon if you want to check out his book. But that was really moving, Suze. Thank you for doing that.
That's okay. Michael, you were going to speak before we played the tribute.
No, that's fine. I have so many thoughts about George, and he knew his stuff, but he also knew that he didn't know everything. And it's great because I'm like a little over half his age, but I don't ever feel like I was talked down to. I felt like a peer, and he knew he could learn things from me, and I learned things from him. And we learned a lot from each other.
We really did. And, I like Madalyn, when I heard him talking about the book in that clip, about the word of mouth book, I hadn't realised that he'd written a book either. And I was there on Amazon as well, Madalyn, having a look at it. There's a fantastic photo of him. Must be a good 30, 40 years ago, but it's so him. It is so definitely him.
Right. It's a great photo of him. He was definitely younger in that photo. But yeah, this book is supposed to be fantastic. I mean, people have talked about it before and raved about it. So I'm really eager to listen to it and learn more of his wisdom, for sure.
Yeah, and I believe his tweets will still be going out, the ones that he'd scheduled as well for a bit. And I found that quite comforting, actually, as I've over the days.
How far in advance did he schedule them? Do we know?
I know.
This is his evergreen tweets that are in. He's got Hype Fury and Tweet Hunter. And so Samantha Postman has been in pretty close contact with me and with his family. And so many people were hoping a lot of his evergreen tweets would continue on. So they had requested through her to talk to the family to see if they would do that. And they thought it was a great idea. So that's their plan.
And that was something I was thinking about with George, is like George was so willing to embrace technology,
Yes.
like his entire career. And 80 years old, like my dad's a year older than George. There's no way my dad would do a smartphone, let alone social audio. Like my dad tried an iPhone for a week. He was like, nah, I'm not into this. That was 6 years ago. And George was like, yeah, I want to know how to connect a pro microphone to Twitter Spaces so I can get the best quality audio for Twitter. Like, I just really admired that and appreciated that with George, that he was just so willing to embrace new things all the time.
Well, one of my favorites, so he was co-hosting with me with Twitter Smarter, and he loved learning from our guests. And last year we had on Warwick Brown talking about TweetDeck. And he was so blown away by learning more about TweetDeck that when we had ended that space, he says, all right, and I'm going to have to go find this audio and compile this for everybody here. He goes, all right, I'm going to tell you all right now, I'm going to go get TweetDeck and I'm going to use it for a week. I said, okay, George, I'm going to hold you to that. I want you to come back next week here in Spaces and report to us and tell us what you think. He fell in love with TweetDeck. He would have never even played around with this tool had it not been for this space that he was helping me co-host. And he just was so wowed by what you could do with this tool. And I just always loved that about him, being not afraid to say, hey, I'm 80 years old, but always willing to learn new things. And what was interesting, when we first met, he only had like 2,000 followers a couple of years ago. He wasn't tweeting a whole lot. And a little over a year ago, I think it was March of last year, he goes, Madalyn, I'm going to take your advice. I'm going to start tweeting more. I'm like, okay, it might help you, it might not. You know, you don't know until you try with some of these strategies. And he was so eager to try it and see how that would improve his presence, how that would help him with his engagement and connections. He was so blown away. And he has really developed some really amazing evergreen tweets. I mean, you could just go on his profile at any given time. And his knowledge was just amazing. And he's so sharp for an 80-year-old. So I'm really glad to know that his family's going to let that continue on. And he was working on, I'm sure many of you all know about his Mind Skills playbook that he's been writing for quite some time. And so Samantha Postman says she's going to try to help get that finished, because that was his goal, was to complete that book.
This guy, like, let's all appreciate for a second, this guy understood interpersonal communication through voice and listening probably better than most any other human on the planet. And he loved social audio, and he loved the things he like. We just need to reflect on that for a minute. This guy, he was all about the voice and conversation. He loved it, appreciated it, and I totally appreciate why he appreciated it, because I've heard it and experienced it myself in being an audio engineer in Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces. Like, there is something special to the voice and conversation.
And he loved hanging out with all of us, which always just boggled me. Like, why is he always hanging around with all of it? I couldn't understand why he was like in every space that I hosted. It's like, you know, but he just wanted to learn, and he wanted to be around like-minded people. And that's the beauty of what we do here in social audio, the way we're able to come together. Suze and I have built a community here, which was not really our full intention. Our intention was to create a space where we can just share what's the latest with social audio, because her and I both really love audio and we love everything about this. And as Spaces was growing and Clubhouse and all these other tools coming and going, it's been a really awesome way for us to all come together. And he was a very big part of that with us.
And isn't it really fitting, though, that we're all, you know, we're all hit emotionally by this because of the power of that voice connection, and because of social audio, and because we had that opportunity to connect with him on here. I just think that is so beautiful, because that is exactly what he was telling us every single week that this was for. It was for, you know, talking to each other, communicating with each other, building strong relationships with one another, friendships, finding other people with similar interests, you know, growing your network, your community and your friendship circle all at once, but doing it through audio and through voice. And so it feels just so right that we feel the loss of George, because he was part of that strong circle that he encouraged us to create through audio only.
Andrew, did you want to share anything?
Just going to say, gone but not forgotten.
Yeah, we will never forget him.